right. Hello and welcome to Around the Horns, the first show of 2023. I'm Aaron. I'm back here with my co-host, Zach. Zach, it feels great to be back on the Zoom with you. It's been a while. Opening day is just around the corner. I know we're both fired up about that, but just in general, how you been? What you been up to? We haven't been on the Zoom in a while. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a little while. Everything's going well. We have power, so that's a positive experience. There's no, crazy ice storm that's hampering the beginning of the college season, which is also great. Yeah, just been spending some time at the dish, looking at the guys practicing and getting ready for the college season. Can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a totally different year for Texas. There's going to be a bunch of new faces. There's a lot of new faces around the conference. There's new coaches on the coaching staff. It's just going to be a lot of change. We're going to dive into all of that. We're going to talk about the offense. We're going to talk about the pitching staff, talk a little bit about the rest of Big 12, make some predictions for what we think about the team this year. So we're going to cover all of that. We're getting real close to opening day, like I mentioned. The Horns are going to be traveling to Arlington here, before we know it, to take on Arkansas, Missouri, and Vanderbilt. We're going to be back next week previewing all three games and that complete tournament breakdown. So we're going to go more big picture here today. But Zach, when I look at this team and I start to think big picture, obviously the first thing that jumps off is just how many new players there are and how many major contributors from last year are gone. And basically all the contributors from last year's team that you can think of, they're probably gone with the exception of Dylan Campbell, Eric Kennedy, Lucas Gordon. Those are the main three, big returning pieces. I guess I want to start with the offense. It's going to be a lot different on offense this year. I'll let you go ahead and take us through how the starting lineup looks like it's going to shake out and where we're going to see these guys on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, to your point, Dylan Campbell really came on at the end of last year, but he really got the chance because Austin Todd got hurt and then EK got hurt. So it was really good in some ways that, you never want to see a guy get injured, but a guy gets a chance and really kind of shows out and shows himself. Yeah, EK's back. He's healthy. He's running around like a madman, of course. And then, Gordo, he took the summer off. He didn't play Cape ball like the year before, and he's ready to go. So it'll be fun. But based on what we've seen from practices, based on what we've seen from scrimmages, and then talking to folks within the program, it looks like Garrett Guillemette, the USC transfer, is going to slide on into Silas's position at catcher. The Waxahachie do-it-all, Mr. Jared Thomas, is going to slide in at first base, replacing Melendez.
No pressure there.
Yeah, no pressure there. It's his second year in the program, but Jack O'Dowd, who transferred in from Vanderbilt a couple years ago, he'll take over Mitch Daly's spot at second base. And of course, Mitch Daly's going to slide over and take over from Faltini. So you had David Hamilton, you had Faltini, and now you got Mitch Daly. So again, no pressure at all.
Yeah.
And then you got Jalen Flores, the superstar freshman from Brandeis down in the San Antonio area. He's taking over at third base. So two freshmen on the hot corner. That'll be a little spicy at times. Then you got the TCU transfer, Porter Brown. He's a grad transfer coming in. He'll take over left field. EK is going to slide over into center field, and then DC will anchor his spot over in right field, which makes a lot of sense because DC and EK are probably the two better defensive outfielders. Porter Brown's a little behind them, and in right field, surprisingly enough, at the dish is actually the more harder spot to defend, and so they'll trust DC to live out there. And then at DH, I think this is where we're going to have a bit more of a revolving door. You're going to see Peyton Powell likely start out there. He's been injured for the last couple of years, but he looks like $1 million in the batting cage, and the guy can hit it for sure. And you'll see Max Ballou, the freshman out of the greater Dallas area. You'll see him get some time at DH, and possibly even a guy like Ace Whitehead or Rylan Galvan, the freshman out of Sinton. So, I think that's pretty much what the lineup's going to look like, and defensively. And it'll be interesting to see how Pierce decides to order the batting.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have to make some changes to his historical approach of power and speed, because there's not as much power, but certainly there's going to be a lot of speed to utilize on the base pass.
Yeah. I wanted to get into that because last year, we all know the Texas offense, it was long balls. It was a powerful offense. They wanted to get guys on base and they wanted to hit homers because they had the lineup to do that. They hit 105 home runs last year. I believe it was easily the most in school history. That's not going to happen this year. This team's not going to hit 105 home runs, and that could be okay. I mean, I was looking at it just Ivan Melendez and Murphy Staley alone hit 51 homers. It could be a long time before this team reaches 51 homers. I mean, we could be talking like the end of the season before we start to flirt with the 51 range. And what that means is this team is going to have to find ways to score in different ways. And what I mean by that is they're going to have to play team offense. And when you play team offense, you want to get on base, you want to draw walks, you want to be aggressive on the bases. But when you don't have as much power, like you need to be aggressive on the bases, but at the same time, you have to be smart on the bases. We saw Texas at times last year be a little careless on the bases. So they're going to have to find that balance of being aggressive, knowing we got to manufacture runs, but at the same time, we don't have room for error to make a lot of errors on the bases. So base running is going to be really important this year. Execution stuff, runner on third, less than 2 outs, get a sac fly, runner on second base, nobody out, hit a ground ball to the second baseman, move him over to third, execute sac bunts when the situation arises for those. Just a lot of little things like that, playing team offense. And I look at this lineup and I think there's a lot of guys that are equipped to play that style. Mitchell Daly comes to mind as a guy that will get on base. He'll move runners over. He's pretty good at controlling the bat. We know he loves to take his walks. We saw him hit a good sac fly in the alumni game. And then you've just got other guys, Jack O'Dowd. He's real crafty. They have a nice balance between righty and lefty in this lineup. I like that a lot. You've got experience with, Kennedy and Porter Brown. There's a lot of moving pieces in this offense. I do think this team is pretty well equipped to play the style of offense that I'm talking about. They've got the speed to be aggressive on the bases and to manufacture runs. So what do you think do you think this offense is well set up to execute and to be able to put up runs without hitting a bunch of homers like the team did last year?
I do. If you look at the makeup of the lineup, there's a lot more balance to this year's lineup. Last year, there was times where it was right-hand only batters, which set you up for some level of failure automatically, right? But you got a guy like EK, Jared Thomas, Jack O'Dowd. You've got the left-handed presence now in the lineup. And if you look, there's guys that have some pop and some power or some ability to tap into it. You have DC who know that he can hit a home run. Garrett Guillemette can hit a home run. Even guys like Jalen Flores have a lot more power than they're probably folks are going to anticipate just looking at him. Oh, they're a freshman coming in. But if you look at the speed and the ability to get on base, you got a lot of guys that can consistently put competitive at bats and put the ball in play and put them in a great position to do more, motion offense or hit and run, which Pierce we know loves to run. And so, I think, it's going to look a lot different. There's going to be a lot fewer runs scored, but I think they're going to still be competitive from an offensive standpoint.
Yep. And a couple guys, you were at the alumni game. I was watching from home. We were both very locked into that. Some hitters that really stood out in that game. Dylan Campbell. I mean, we saw it in the postseason last year when he really exploded onto the scene. He looks locked in. He was ripping balls all over the yard in the alumni game. I love his swing so much. Just the power that he generates from, he's obviously very strong and very athletic, but like a smaller dude, not that tall. And then just the short swing that he has to be able to generate that much power, like considering his frame and how quick that swing is, it really amazes me every single time I see it. He's locked in, ready to go. Jack O'Dowd had some really good at-bats in the alumni game. That was good to see. And then the guy I was hoping you could touch on a little bit more, Jared Thomas, the chosen one to fill in at first base for Ivan Melendez, the left-handed hitting freshman. He looked ready to go. David Pierce had him right in the middle of that order during the alumni game, if that's any preview of what we might see. So I know you're a big Jared Thomas guy. You've got some high expectations. Can you go ahead and tell us a little more about Thomas, what he's like and what fans might be able to expect from the new first baseman?
Yeah, Jared Thomas, he came out of high school at Waxahachie as a two-way player, right? He did throw a complete game, 17 strikeouts. So, he's just an athlete in general. He played right field. He played first baseman. Long-term, 6'2", kind of lanky kid. Some ways reminds me almost like a Brandon Belt type player. He's just athletic and he moves really well for his size, though. You'll see him steal bases. But he came out as one of the top prep left-handed hitters behind, of course, first rounder Jet Williams. He was the 24th, I think, prospect overall in the state of Texas. So he was definitely a guy that was going to flirt with, the top couple rounds of MLB. He was a really strong commitment and signee to Texas, though, which, pushed a lot of teams away. He's got a really good feel for this strike zone. He's got, I think his strongest attribute, though, is he keeps that bat in the zone for a really long time. You see some guys with the quick hands, that can get through the zone and kind of make up for that. He doesn't have the quickest hands, but when you keep that bat through the zone for a long time, you're going to make up and you're going to be able to adjust. You're going to be able to hit those pitches that are away, tailing away, have some spin or movement on them. And so he just puts really competitive at bats, which I think you saw in the alumni game. He was 2 for 4, and he looks solid. He doesn't look like a freshman at the plate. He doesn't look overwhelmed. And even looking at him in the fall, like during the fall World Series to the alumni game, you can see that he's more mature even from then to now. So I think it's easy guy to see develop into power. We talk about him being lanky. Give him a year, give him 2 years with Coach Couch in the strength and conditioning program. And he's a guy that has gap to gap power now. You can see him develop some actual power just naturally from that left side. So
yeah, what always stands out to me when I've just the limited times that I've been able to see Thomas play, it's a very solid swing, just like he talked about. It's not one of those crazy, high leg kick, uppercut. It's just a very solid swing, which I think is going to help him a lot in his freshman year. He looks very comfortable at the plate. So, you never know when you get into your first college games as a freshman. He might not look as comfortable at the plate early on, but as he settles in, he's got the very solid swing to fall back on, which is going to help him put the ball in play, which is going to be really important in the middle of that lineup. Like I talked about, they're going to need to be manufacturing runs. He's going to be in the middle of the lineup, which means you're going to have guys like Dylan Campbell. You're going to have guys like Eric Kennedy on base a lot of times. So it's going to be important for him to be able to put the ball in play. So I think he's pretty well set up to have a nice year, even if, he doesn't fill out completely and the power isn't all there in year one. I don't think that's the priority right now. He just needs to have good, solid at bats, hit the ball all over the yard. So I like that a lot. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about Jared Thomas this year. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about the offense. I want to transition us here to the mound where, again, it's going to be a lot different from last year. There's no Pete Hansen. There's no Tristan Stevens. Aaron Nixon, I know he had a bad year last year, but he's not there anymore. There's a lot lost on the mound. So I want to start here with Lucas Gordon, the main returner coming back. He projects to be the Friday night guy. And it's going to be really fun to watch Gordon this year because, as you mentioned, he didn't pitch over the summer. Instead, he went to some different places, worked on his arsenal a little bit, and he added a slider, which if you remember Gordon last year, he was almost all fastball changeup. And then he did have a curveball that he mixed in from time to time, but he relied heavily on the fastball changeup and the lack of a third pitch. You and I have talked about this a lot. That's fine when you're pitching against kind of lower tier Big 12 teams or, midweek games. But when we got into the super regional, when we get into Omaha, you really need that third pitch when you're going up against top tier offenses, especially when Gordon, he isn't the guy that's going to, blow by you with 97, 98. So he added a slider this summer. It's a traditional sweeping slider, more horizontal movement. We saw him throw it during the alumni game. And, people might point to he struggled in the alumni game. The raw stats weren't very good. He gave up some hits, gave up some runs. I'm not really worried about the alumni game. Pete Hansen struggled in the alumni game last year. A lot of those guys are just out there trying to get a feel, working on specific pitches. I like the way that Gordon's slider looked. It just, the movement on it, he was struggling to get it down. He was leaving it up a little bit, but it just feels like it's going to be a better pitch for him, especially against right-handed batters. If he can get the righties to where they have to respect the back foot slider, and then they also have to respect, the changeup that fades away from them that he is known for, that's his best pitch, along with the sinker that obviously will sit, anywhere 90, 93. I think that's going to be a big pitch for him. It'll be interesting to see how that develops throughout the year. But he's not going to be your prototypical, Texas Friday night starter, big righty, go out there, strike out 13, 14 dudes. He's still going to be a guy that's go out there, give you a chance to win. But at that same time, we know the floor is pretty solid with Lucas Gordon. I do think there is room for the ceiling to grow this year and for him to become a guy that can go toe to toe with some of the, aces around the Big 12 and around the country. So what were your overall impressions from Gordon of what we saw in the fall in the alumni game and how you think that slider could really help him out this year?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. Having a third pitch is just massive, right? He didn't really use that curveball a ton.
Not much.
It didn't have the break and the sharpness to it that could, hitters were afraid of, right? And so coming with that slider, I think it's really vital because his fastball sits 91, 92. His
Yep.
changeup sits in the mid to low 80s. Well, now you have a slider that sits in the high 70s, low 80s potential. And when the first time I saw it in the alumni game, I was like, oh, where's that going? Did he misplace that changeup? No, that's the slider, right? So, like as you said, like it has good shape. Once you start to pick up on it, it actually has some good spin. I think it'll be really good for him when there were times where he could get cued on last season and he could run out of pitches essentially to have an out. And so I think it'll be big. You saw him try to throw it against some good alumni hitters, and
Yes.
he did have some success with it. So I think that's an intriguing pitch to add to his arsenal. And talking with him, obviously Gordon's always Cali cool. He's got a lot of confidence. That's his game. And he said he really's been having fun with that slider. So I think as the season progresses, especially, you're going to see a lot more confidence in it, and he'll be able to attack the zone a little bit harder.
Yep, that was the next thing I was going to hit on. The slider is a really interesting pitch, just from the perspective of the more confidence you have in it, the better it's going to be. And I know that can be said about all pitches, but the slider specifically, and specifically for Gordon, he needs to be throwing it hard. That way, it can play off the fastball, it can play off the changeup, and it can really, that'll force the right-handed batters to really respect it. The harder he can throw it, and then the harder you throw it, the more bite it's going to have. Just overall, it's a better pitch, the more confidence you have in it, and the harder that you're able to throw it. So it'll be interesting to see that pitch progress as the year goes on, and then see how that affects his outings and, the counting stats. And it might allow him to work out of more jams. He wasn't a big strikeout guy, and that'll be a big thing at times this year. There will be times where he runs into its bases loaded, one out in the fourth inning. You need to bear down and get a strikeout to prevent the runs from getting off the board. And the slider could really set him up to do that this year. So I'm excited to see him pitch this year. I'm excited to see the new slider progress as the year goes on. And I'm really excited to talk about and watch the next guy, which we think is going to be the Saturday starter, and that is Zane Morehouse. I'll let you start us off with Zane Morehouse, and then I'll hop in there whenever you're wrapped up.
Yeah, I think the biggest when you're talking to the coaches during the fall and then this spring, they said Zane Morehouse took the biggest steps from anyone as a progression, which you always want to hear, right? Like if a guy is going to be counted on in such a big role, you want to hear that he's progressing, he's gaining confidence, he's making the next steps. And so hearing that is really positive development. I think the biggest thing for me with Morehouse is we know he has stuff, right? He has 96-mile-an-hour fastball. He's got a really, really sharp break on his and horizontal break on his breaking balls. But to me, it's all about efficiency. For Morehouse to be successful, to stay out of trouble, he can't get so deep into counts. Because when he does, he can let one hang up there, and that's when you're going to see one banged out to over the wall, right? So I think if he mentally sticks with it and he just takes that attack approach, like don't worry how many innings you're going to go, just trust your bullpen to come in and eat innings, just go out and attack. I think he could have a massive year, and I think that would be massive for Texas as well.
Yep, I agree. This is a guy that they really need to have a big year, because the pitching depth, you talked about trusting your bullpen. That's great and all. That might not be the reality. We don't know. It might be the reality. It might not be. It's just, It's a young pitching staff. It's an inexperienced pitching staff. We know Texas had issues in the bullpen last year. So if Morehouse could be a guy and he can be more efficient with his pitches, and eventually at some point in the season, he is a guy that is consistently going 5, he's pushing into 6 innings on a Saturday, on a Sunday, that could really be big for the Texas bullpen, because when he's on, he's going to be preventing runs. He's going to be getting strikeouts. He's going to get a lot of ground balls with that very, with that fastball that really jumps on you, that plays off the slider really well. He's an X factor, man. I mean, the stats aren't there last year if you just take a glimpse, but watching him pitch that slider, it's probably the best pitch on the team. The fastball really plays. He's a guy that when he's in a rhythm, he can really get it going. And then sometimes, he gets in the stretch, his timing gets thrown off a little bit, and he can get out of rhythm. So avoiding those disaster innings, that's going to be big for him this year. Just trying to be consistent in the zone, just from inning to inning, outing to outing. He's going to be a big part of the team this year, and he'll be someone I'm really locked in on from the beginning of the season, because if you can get, with a guy like Morehouse, who doesn't have too much experience, but he knows he's got really good stuff, if he can go out, week 1, week 2 with some really good outings, that could carry him, throughout the whole season. Because if he gets that confidence right off the bat, just, look out if you're the rest of the Big 12, because all of a sudden, if Gordon's got his slider working, if Morehouse is confident and efficient with his pitches, that 1-2 punch could be a lot better than people might expect this year, who aren't too familiar with the top two guys in the Texas rotation.
Especially when you look at the rest of the Big 12, and there
Yep.
isn't a single team in the Big 12 this year that returns more than one starting pitcher from the weekend rotation. There isn't. I mean, if you look at the Big 12 in general, pitching is gone. It's all transferred. It's moved on to the MLB draft for the most part. And so when you think about if Texas can put together that 1-2 punch, suddenly they've got a leg up on the vast majority of the teams out there.
Yep, I agree. No, it's going to be huge. And then the last guy that we expect to see on Sunday in Arlington is going to be Charlie Hurley. He is the righty transfer from USC, 6'8". I feel like that's important to mention. Texas fans will notice that when he takes the bump, but never bad to have a 6'8" righty on the mound. He's not going to overpower you. You might think 6'8" is this guy up there chucking 99 miles an hour. That's not the case. He'll sit low 90s. And he's a pitcher. He's not a thrower. He's going to mix a lot. He's going to mix a lot of pitches. He's got his fastball. He likes throwing his changeup to lefties. He'll mix a curveball and a slider that do have different shapes on them. And then, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Hurley, because in USC, the Pac-12 is not a dominant conference. He was a starter for them. His numbers were fine. And then you wonder, okay, coming over to Texas, you get him working with Woody Williams. You get him working with Chris Gordon, the new kind of pitching guys that go back and forth. You get a guy with a 6'8" frame. There's a potential there that, it could all click and it could come together, and he could really be a good option on Sunday to go out there and eat innings. The walks stand out. He didn't have the best strikeout to walk ratio in the Pac-12. So when you got a guy that isn't going to necessarily dominate with his stuff, you don't also want that guy putting guys on the bases with walks, because that's when you can potentially lead into big innings. Just a lot of balls in play. When there's balls in play and there's guys on base, that could lead to some problems, especially, we don't exactly know what the Texas defense is going to be like this year. Probably a little worse than last year, but still good overall, we assume. So it'll be interesting to see what Hurley does. He's got to limit the free passes. I'm just excited to see what the pitching, what the pitching staff or the pitching coaches do with him, because, Gordon, you kind of know who he is. Morehouse, he's got the dominant stuff. We're going to talk about some other guys. Hurley is a guy that I feel like if you get the right coaches saying the right things to him, that's a guy that coaching could really elevate his game, maybe more so than others. So I'm going to be really locked in on Hurley, in that regard, is seeing what they're doing with him throughout the season and what he looks like early in the year. So, what are your overall impressions from Hurley? We've seen him a couple of times now.
Yeah, I've seen him a couple of times, got a chance to talk with him a couple of times in person. He's got a really kind of laid back personality, Cali boy, right? I think the biggest thing for him is you touched on it, that secondary stuff. He's not going to overpower you, but having that 6'8" frame, he's reaching out there, right? So it's coming downhill, and it's going to look a little faster than it actually is. But, keeping batters off kilter with that secondary pitch is going to be really important. To me, the biggest thing for success for Charlie is being able to attack the zone. Don't be afraid to come in, thrust the defense. You don't always have to nibble. And so when he gets in trouble, he does elevate his stuff, and that's where, he runs in trouble, or he lets it leave it outside and he nibbles, and that's where he walks guys. So again, I think some of it's just confidence. The guys are going to rub off on Gordo on Friday nights. They're going to see him go out there and have that confidence. And I think that could really help both Morehouse and Hurley. But it's, Hurley is a guy that's not going to dominate, but he can definitely eat innings for you. Which on some days, half the time, it's, what does Pierce always say? It's either the 3 S's. It's get the sweep, avoid the sweep, or win the series. And so you need a guy that can go out there and compete. And so that's Hurley.
Yeah, the jump from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, even though, the Big 12 is going to be a little different this year, that's going to be interesting, because I could just see it going a lot of different ways. I could see it going, he's facing better competition. The stuff might not play as well, maybe takes a step back. But at the same time, you get Woody Williams, you get Chris Gordon, you get some really good coaching, you get the awesome facilities at Texas. He gets more experience as a college pitcher. It could elevate him. So I could really see that going either direction. He prototypes as that guy that can go out there on a Sunday and eat innings, go 5 innings, 3 runs, give you a chance to win. But that's only going to be if he's avoiding the walks, because if the walks pile up, he's not going to be immune to big innings and, bad outings. So that'll be big. I'm really excited to watch him pitch. I'm always excited to watch the pitchers. Everyone knows that about me by this point. Let's go a little more quickly through some of the other arms that either will be, Tuesday starters, possibly back in relievers. This team doesn't have like a set closer right now. So all of the rest of the roles are kind of up in the air. And I'll let you go ahead and start out with your guy, LeBaron Johnson Jr. He's someone we both love to watch, and I'll let you get us started there.
Yeah, I mean, LBJ is a guy that when he decommitted from Florida and committed to Texas, I probably was the most excited person outside of the coaching staff, right? Like this guy, if you look at him, he just oozes potential, and that's what it is, right? It's all potential. He's a 6'2", 6'3" guy with a cannon of the arm. He can touch 98, 99. It's all just been harnessing his command and his release point, because at times last year it was all down in the dirt. I've seen it where he's been more consistent, where it's not as much of that, looseness of the command, but it really is just being more consistent pitch over pitch now, right? And so if it all comes together and clicks for him, like watch out, he's a day one type of guy in the draft. Right now, though, he's a weapon that can be utilized in kind of short spurts. The staff has worked on extending him to some degree. There was even talking maybe he could start a midweek game or two. But again, it's time in the lab. It's time competitively pitching and just trying to keep it consistent for him.
Yep, I think he's another guy that the beginning of the season will be really important. David Pierce was talking about this, I believe it was after the alumni game. You really want to establish roles on a pitching staff early in the year, because the earlier you can establish roles, and that means the earlier that guys can get comfortable, they can get into a routine, they can know what's expected of them, and it's not all over the place last year. That's something that Texas did not have last year. The bullpen roles were all over the place. You had Aaron Nixon, he was the closer, then he wasn't the closer, then nobody was really the closer. You had the rotation was set until Tanner Witt gets hurt. Then the rotation set, oh, wait, no, now Tristan Stevens, we're going to go to a different role with him. They didn't have those set roles. And I think LBJ is a guy that if he can pitch well early in the year, he can establish himself with a role, and he can establish the trust of the coaching staff. That was one thing that I took away from last season, is they all obviously love LBJ. The stuff is there. Everyone knows it. I don't think the coaching staff had a ton of trust in him, just from what they were going to get outing to outing. Little things like fielding his position, holding on base runners. All the little things. I don't know if the trust was there. So if he can establish a role early, establish some confidence among the coaching staff, that could be a really big piece to the Texas bullpen, to the Texas pitching staff. So I like that call a lot. Another guy that figures to play a major part is going to be Andre Duplantier. It's, his career is going to be one that we look back on. It might be a little bit of a what if, but I don't want to dwell on that too much, because he's still a guy that is going to be a valuable piece of this pitching staff that can still go out there and give you quality innings, even if it's not with a mid-90s fastball like we might have hoped for Duplantier on one day. That doesn't seem like it's going to be the case anymore. But while you might not have that guy out there throwing 95, 96, you still have a guy with experience, have a guy that is pretty calm under pressure. That's the one thing I always liked about them. You can never really tell if he was having the best outing of his life or if he was out there getting rocked. His demeanor was always the same on the mound. He's got a fastball that sinks, kind of 88 to 91. He's got a slider that plays off of it. So there's nothing wrong with a veteran sinker slider right-handed pitcher that, is cool as a cucumber out there on the mound. So he's a guy that, while the upside might not be what we once hoped, he's going to be a really solid part of the pitching staff. And I'm excited to see what they do with him. He's a guy they could roll out on Tuesdays. He's a guy they could roll out for lower leverage multi innings at a time on a weekend. They've got a lot of options with him, just being an experienced guy that has done both. What are your quick thoughts there, Andre?
Yeah, Dre's got some really good action on his breaking stuff. It's realistically, he's a guy that's never going to throw super hard, even despite the injury, just the way he throws, right? I talked to Pierce at length about this last week, and Pierce was talking about the way that the ball cuts and the way that the ball spins out of his hand. It's really hard to pick up. And so he can get by living in that 85 to 88 mile range. Now, would the coaches like him to get back up to around 91 velo? Absolutely. And that's the goal, right? Long term. But yeah, he's a guy that's going to get a lot of work. Again, experience and trust are the words there. He knows how to compete. He knows what it means to compete. And so you'll see a lot of him even potentially start a midweek game or two.
Yep. I just think it's important on a pitching staff without a lot of experience, without a lot of, just, there's not much to fall back on in this pitching staff, but he is a guy. I'll always remember last year, the ECU game when Texas makes a huge run, they take the lead, and then Duplantier comes out. I believe it was in the eighth, it could have been the ninth, and he gives up the game tying homer.
Mhm.
You think, oh, the crowd's going crazy. It could all fall apart here. This could be ECU's chance to really win. And what does Duplantier do? He just puts it behind him. He gave up the home run, the game's tied, and he went out there and he didn't give up any more runs the rest of the inning, which was huge, which I believe set up the Dylan Campbell walk-off single. I mean, that's who he is. He's a guy that's calm under pressure. He's going to go out there. You know what you're going to get from him most of the time. So it's going to be exciting. Another guy that we're interested in seeing that we saw late in the game on Saturday was Cody Howard, the freshman from Baylor. He didn't see any action for the Bears last year, but he's out there. He's throwing 91, 92 with his fastball. I really like his mechanics. They're very smooth, very repeatable. He just doesn't feel like a guy that's going to go out there and spray it around and walk a bunch of guys. He's got good off-speed stuff to rely on. He seems like a guy that, we're just reading, what we've seen in the fall in the alumni game. He seems like a guy that is going to see some action early in the year out of the bullpen.
Yeah, and talking to Pierce after the alumni game, he said he was really impressed with what Howard's done coming off that injury last season where he didn't get to pitch for Baylor. Yep. He's got that makeup of a guy that's your back end. He comes in and he stops. He's a stopper. Not necessarily a closer necessarily yet, but a good stopper. And so I think we'll see a lot of him early on because the coaching staff wants to put that trust in him, wants to throw him out there, see what he can do. The coaching staff has always been about, hey, let's see what they do. How fast can they drink from that fire hose and how do they handle the fire? And so, yeah, he'll definitely be a piece going forward. And the same thing with Chris Stewart, the JUCO transfer from Sanjak. He can throw a little harder. He's a lefty throwing 92, 95, but I feel like he's a guy that, he may start out small at the beginning of the year. And by the end of the year, he could be an absolute weapon for this staff because he knows how to pitch. He's like Howard. He's very, very competitive. And he's got enough stuff there to, make a difference on the back end.
Yep. No, Stewart's going to be a really interesting guy. When he first came in, they were possibly considering him for a Sunday role, but I think having him out of the bullpen, a lefty throwing pretty hard, that's going to be advantageous for, how Pierce can manage the bullpen over the season. Another guy, Texas fans are a lot more familiar with, that's Luke Harrison. He's a lefty, doesn't throw as hard, but, in a season last year that was just the Texas bullpen, nobody ever knew what we were going to get from the Texas bullpen last year. Harrison was probably the most consistent guy, and he wasn't consistently dominant, but he was consistently in the zone, throwing strikes, getting ground balls, being able to take advantage of his lefty-lefty matchups. So I think you can expect a lot more of the same from Luke Harrison this year. Travis Staley, he was the freshman last year that came out the gates, just guns a-blazing, pounding the zone with fastballs. And he had a lot of ups and downs. I mean, it was a roller coaster year for Travis Staley. So it'll be interesting to see if he can establish more of a rhythm this year, have the trust of the coaching staff, and maybe be more consistent from outing to outing. But when you're a young reliever pitching in a lot of high leverage situations for a team with high expectations, that might happen from time to time. So it'll be interesting to see if he can be a little more consistent this year, because we still like the stuff that Staley has to offer. And then I'll let you hit on a couple more of the freshmen and then a transfer from Arkansas.
Yeah, I mean, the transfer from Arkansas, Heston Toll, he's not going to overpower you with his stuff, but he's got a really, really good slider, maybe one of the best on the team, in fact. And so he comes in and keeps guys off balance. He came in, he looked really good during the alumni game. And the biggest thing for him is health. He's finally healthy. He was off and on injured during his first 2 years at Arkansas. And even Coach Pierce was joking around with Dave Van Horn on the media availability earlier this week around, hey, why did you let Heston Toll transfer out? He's going to be a Friday night starter for us, But you can tell that there's some comfort there with Toll, having been experienced in the SEC at the highest level. They know what they're getting from him. And so I think they're going to use him early in those high leverage situations to make sure, hey, we're not putting too much on the staff and we can help ease that transition, bring some new guys in. But he's a guy I could definitely see getting quite a few innings this season. And then you look at some of the newbies, right? Kobe Minchie, his nickname, I think, is Friday Night, because he's got that competitive juice in him. He wants to be that Friday night guy at Texas. And I heard that he is one of the best changeups on the staff. He's got a fastball that sits 92, 95. He wants to compete. He's got that mentality. And so I could definitely see him being a guy that, gets a look on a Tuesday night to be a starter, or on a weekend series, they're going to bring him in to see what he can do in those high leverage situations. Because sometimes when it comes to pitching, it's not all about the stuff. Gordo talks about that all the time. It's about the confidence and the ability to locate. And so if he can do that, he suddenly becomes a really, really big piece. And, he was one of those guys that came out of nowhere. He was homeschooled, didn't attend a lot of the camps. Texas took a flyer on him after they saw him at a camp, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, he could be a big part of the back end. And then the last guy, Max Grubbs, he's a back end guy that has a solid fastball, mid to low 90s. He's a guy that has that mentality that, they talk a lot about the back end. I could see him growing into that role as the season progresses, and the coach is kind of easing him in there. And, by the end of the season, he plays a really big part in the back end of games. So.
Yep, I think it'll be interesting to watch all three of those guys throughout the year. Like I said, if this bullpen can just establish roles early on, and they know, okay, this is our guy if we're down 5 and we need someone to eat innings and keep us in the game. This is our guy if we need to get a lefty out, with the bases loaded in the 8th inning. This is our guy, if we're up 2 in the 9th. It would be good to be able to establish those roles. So that's something I'm going to look for early in the season. It's going to be interesting to watch as the year goes on, especially in Arlington when, it's interesting. We're going to talk more about Arlington last year, but, those are going to be some of the best teams that Texas plays this year. And it's right off the bat. So you're going to get thrown into the fire there immediately. I want to do a little more big picture because while we would both love, to watch and, cover and root and, just see a great team out there dominate like Texas did at times last year. That might be the case at times. It might not be the case at times. This team, I think about the team, and while the individual players, you might think what you're getting from a lot of them, and they're all pretty solid and well put together. I feel like the team as a whole, it's kind of a high floor, high ceiling type of team. I want to hit on a couple of things of, why the season could be a massive success, and then why the season, could have fans, looking more forward to next year, consider it a little more of a reboot. I'm going to start off with just why I think this season could be really good. And it starts with Dylan Campbell just being Dylan Campbell. I don't think either one of us are worried about him. I think we're both projecting some really good things from Dylan Campbell. Eric Kennedy just being healthy. If he's on the field, we know what we're going to get from EK. He's been here for a while. It's just about health for him. And then, I think freshmen could step up. We both like Jared Thomas. Jalen Flores was a guy that we weren't necessarily even expecting to be on this team. And then we thought he might, be lost to the draft. He didn't end up being lost to the draft, so he makes it on campus. So you could get big time performances from Thomas and Flores there on the corners. We both love Zane Morehouse as an X factor, LeBaron Johnson Jr. an X factor. If those guys can establish roles and, kind of be the dominant righties that you look for in a conference like the Big 12, then you could be making some noise because the Big 12 is open. It's not an absolute gauntlet. Texas wasn't the only team that lost all their guys. That happened pretty much throughout the conference. So those are some of the reasons why I think this season could be a big success for Texas. What are your thoughts there? What do you think the, potential is for this team if everything clicks?
Yeah, I mean, look, you got DC. He's a guy that has a lot of confidence in himself. At times he's still learning, I think, some of that vocal role. Because if you look at last year, there was a lot of leaders on the team. And so him and Daly have tried to kind of step into that role. EK is more of the quiet guy that, he just leads by example. What you're going to get. But for me, this is a really athletic lineup that can put pressure on opposing pitchers. I feel like they have more arms available to them this year than they did, and more potential. Now, they have to realize that potential, right? They still have to compete and improve themselves. But just in general, I feel like there's more arms available for Pierce to lean on to say, look, we don't have cemented roles yet, but over the first 2 months of the season, we're going to really grow into these roles, and we're going to find out who's going to be with us for the rest of the season. And then just with the loss of talent to the MLB draft from the Big 12, I think is going to play a role in this season. While I think there's a clear favorite, I could easily see a sleeper coming out of the nowhere and just really running away with it. So it is going to be a wide open season, in my opinion. In the Big 12, it should be a lot of fun though. So
Yep. And then just on the flip side, a couple of things that do worry me when I look through the team and I look through the roster. I think the pitching, it's possible that it just spirals again like it did last year. I mean, you could argue there's even less stability. There's way less stability coming into the season. And then, no one really expected the bullpen and the rotation to kind of fall apart in the way that it did last year. But, if those roles aren't established, there's still a lot of inexperience. I don't think it's a lock that the pitching staff is going to be, more consistent this year. That could still be a problem. I worry just a bit about the defense. I don't worry about it being a bad defense, like a bottom tier defense, but I just look at every position and I'm like, okay, Ivan Melendez, he might not be winning any gold gloves in his MLB career if he does play first base, but he was really solid last year. Skylar Messenger at third base, he was incredible throughout the entire year. Faltini was awesome at short. Daly was really good at second. Is O'Dowd going to be as good as Daly was at second? Is Daly going to replace what Faltini did at short from a defensive standpoint? Yeah. I think that's a lot to ask. You've got Kennedy moving from the corner to center field. That's not an easy shift. People might think you're just out there catching fly balls, but center field is a little different and a little more important than the corner positions. And that was an area where, Hodo, he was just money in the bank last year. He was catching everything. He was tracking balls coming in, going back, and then catcher, there's a drop off there defensively. While we think Guillemets going to be solid, Ardoin was just throwing out runners at a ridiculous rate. So I worry a little bit about the defense, especially when you have a pitching staff that might not be striking out a ton of guys. That's why I think it would be good for Morehouse to get ahead in counts, to put guys away for Gordon, to establish that slider, to get strikeouts. Maybe the pressure isn't on the defense as much because I'm not sure there. Those are some things that worry me a little bit. Overall, I'm pretty high on the team. What are you, what kind of gives you pause when you think about, the outcomes of the season?
Yeah. I think anytime you lost that much experience, again, the leadership and the production are the two most obvious things that just pop out. Certainly touching on the defense, Jack O'Dowd is still working on adjusting to that first step. I think Mitch Daly has a little bit better of a first step and lateral mobility than O'Dowd. So you could see some differences there. Plus, Faltini and Daly had a really good relationship between second and shortstop and turning those double plays. Nothing to take away from O'Dowd and Daly, but it's not going to be quite the same. And so the other thing is, you got two freshmen at the hot corner, right? You got Flores at third base and you got Thomas at first base. So there's going to be some bumps. And I think even Pierce has acknowledged that the fall and this spring is like, look, there's going to be times where we make a mistake, and that's fine. It's about how they, work through that mistake. They learn from it and they come out better. I think this team is one of those teams that's going to look a lot different early on than they are late in the season, but that's definitely a concern, right? And then pitching wise, again, we talked about it earlier, but there's a lot of potential. They still have to prove themselves. They still have to go out there and compete. So if they're not able to do it, then, it could not be that much fun, or it could be a really interesting and gritty team that no one wants to play at the end of the season. So.
No, I completely agree. This could go in a lot of different directions. When we look at the Big 12, I'm not going to be shocked if Texas, finishes on top of the conference. I'm not going to be shocked if they're rolling into the Big 12 tournament as a 6 or 7 seed. You don't know. That's just how it's going to be. But it's kind of our job. It's our duty to put some takes out there. We got to give the people what they want. So I've got Oklahoma State winning the conference. They were picked first in the coaches poll. They're the favorite on paper for a reason. They've got a lot of, talented guys coming back. Rock Riggio, Nolan McLean jumped to mind for me. Jerron Watts-Brown coming in from Long Beach, I believe. He's going to be probably their Friday night guy. He brings a lot to the table on the mound. So I've got Oklahoma State at the top of the conference. I actually have Texas number 3, which is pretty aggressive on my end, but I do think there's a lot of room for this team to grow as the year goes on, to be hitting their stride as conference play rolls around. So if things bounce their way, I'm not going to be surprised if Texas can't sneak into the top 3. Who do you have at the top of the conference, and then where do you think Texas might slot in, even though it's very hard to predict?
Yeah, I mean, I think I put down my prediction as Oklahoma State at 1, Texas at 5.
Yep.
When you look at that, if you look at historical trends from the Big 12 and Texas, if going back, I think I did back to 2014 or 2012, historically, Texas averages a fifth place finish in the Big 12. They've had some really good finishes, obviously, where they finished first, and they've had a couple of not so great finishes. And so most of the time, the Big 12 is a slog. It's really tough to be really, really good at it. And so it's just one of those years where with so much newness, I can't say, yeah, I really see them being better than a couple of the top teams. And, if you look at Oklahoma State, they're my hands-on favorite to win the conference and make Omaha. And the reason I think that is they have a dynamic second baseman in Rock Riggio. The guy's, a future potential for golden spikes. I mean, he's that good defensively and offensively. They bring in Jerron Watt-Browns. He's a future first rounder as a Friday night guy. They have Nolan McLean, which Coach Pierce joked around at the alumni game, like, why the heck is this guy still in college? Like, come on, please get him out of here, right? He's almost at Jace Young, where he can come and throw 100 miles an hour, or he can just be hitting dingers from third base. And so they have a really solid core group of guys, and they return some really good experience. You look at TCU, another future first rounder at third base, Braden Taylor. The dude is electric. He can hit the ball. He's added more muscle. He's just going to be even better. They're under their second year under Los. And if you look at the pieces they've added, West Virginia transfer Austin Davis, the speedster. Baylor second baseman Trey Richardson, again, known for his offense and athleticism. They added true freshman shortstop Anthony Silva, he was one of the highest rated prospects in the state of Texas. And they added a masher and JUCO transfer Fontenelle. Well, they already had a strong base. So really the only question marks at TCU is pitching. Can Savage, can Wright, can Candace Vanderhyde step up? Remains to be seen, right? But I trust Los when it comes to pitching. He knows what he's doing. So they're really dangerous. They're right there with Oklahoma State, in my opinion. Texas Tech, again, this is a squad similar to Texas that probably has more questions.
I agree. Yeah.
Than you really would anticipate a Tadlock squad having. At the end of the day, though, I trust Tadlock to bring in some hitters. So, I trust that they can hit. For me, it's all about their pitching. But that they have a redshirt freshman, Kevin Bazell, that plays third base. The dude can rock the ball. He could be the next great hitter at Tech. But they don't bring any starter from pitching back that has a sub 3.9 ERA. Not necessarily what you want to see, because they weren't very good pitching last year either. And then you have Oklahoma. The only team to lose more production and experience than Texas is Oklahoma. Like they lost their entire rotation. I think they lost 7 or 8 of their top pitchers, like insane amount of talent that they combined up there. But they have the offense under Willits. They're going to have that havoc offense. They're going to run even more than they did last year. So look out West Virginia record of 100 plus stolen bases. Like they're coming for you, and they're going to exceed it, right? I think they stole 12 or 13 in their fall world game. So super athletic. Then the biggest question again is pitching. Can they put together the pieces? And they brought in a lot of new guys and transfers to get them back to where they were last year. So the dark horse for me in the Big 12 was West Virginia. I think they lost their 2 best fielders. Austin Davis transferred, obviously, and then trying to remember the other guy. He graduated. The biggest question is really who's going to be their number 2 pitcher. They have Ben Hampton, who dominated Cape League. They get Grant Siegel from Tulane, who had an amazing freshman year. So suddenly they have a really, really strong 1-2 punch. They can make a lot of noise. So it's a wide open year. There's a lot of question marks, and it should be interesting to see how the season flows.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's one thing to fall back on. Texas fans might think, oh man, we lost so many guys. There's so many question marks. This is going to be a tough year. Well, I mean, pretty much every other team in the conference, they lost a lot of guys, and there's a lot of question marks. So it doesn't mean that Texas can't go out there and win the Big 12, compete, for a potential 1 or 2 seed in a regional. There's still things could go well this year. Texas is not the only team that lost a lot of pieces. With COVID, it backed up a lot of rosters. There was a lot of talent in college baseball last year, which means there was a lot of talent going out. So, just because it's a new team doesn't mean it's a team that can't get things done. All right, Zach, we did this exercise last year. We had mixed results here. We wanted to predict, things like most homers, MVP, best pitcher. we got a little cute at MVP last year. I actually want to start there, even though we've got a list at the bottom here. We tried to mix it up at MVP last year. Neither one of us picked Ivan Melendez. Tough look by us. I picked Mitchell Daly, didn't quite work out. You picked Trey Faltini. And he was great. Just was not Ivan Melendez. So neither one of us are getting cute this year. My team MVP, I am going with Dylan Campbell, and I'm not thinking twice about it. I think it's going to be a monster year. I think he's going to, hit a bunch of homers. I think he's going to play great defense. I think he's going to be on base. I think he's going to be the dude this year. That's my pick.
Yeah, I mean DC, right? He's got all the tools there. He can play defense out in right field. The guy can hit the ball a mile. He can also hit for average. He's athletic, so he's going to steal a lot of bases. I think that the staff's really going to let him just be free reign and turn him loose. And so, he's going to be the offensive guy. I would not be shocked if he's not batting third or fourth, right, in the lineup. He's that kind of guy. And so, yeah, they're gonna rely on him a lot. And in talking to him, I think he's ready for it. I think he has expectations of himself to have a big year. And like you talked about earlier, he's locked in. He's ready to go. He's ready to go face some top talent. So.
Yep. We both have Dylan Campbell listed for most homers, so that should be no surprise there. X Factor. This is a tough one because, when you have a team with this much inexperience and then just freshmen, and you can list the whole team as X Factors, but if we just need to pick, one guy to kind of put your name on, I think the most important player that, if this guy does really well this year, Texas is going to, that will help them a lot, help them win games, help them win the conference. If this guy struggles this year, I think it really could kind of spiral the team. For me, it's Zane Morehouse. And I think it's going to work out on the positive side. I really do believe in him. I think the stuff plays. I think the experience from last year probably helped him out a little bit. He knows he's got a set role in the rotation, at least to begin the year. So I think if things go right, Texas has just a really good Saturday night righty to put guys away, take some pressure off the defense, take some pressure off the offense. I think that should be huge. And if it doesn't go right, I think, there will be questions in the rotation. The bullpen becomes even more thin. I think that could potentially be very bad. So, Zane Morehouse is the X factor for me. I think it could go either way, but that's who I'm going with.
Yeah, so I'm gonna cheat just a little bit here, right? I'm gonna name two people. I'm going with the two freshmen, Jalen Flores and Jared Thomas. From an offensive standpoint, I think Jared Thomas is going to be posed to have a really good year. Secretly whispering freshman All-American types guy.
Ooh, there it is.
And then Flores, defensively, offensively, there was a reason that he was a day one potential draft pick, right? There's a lot of potential there. I think he's still unlocking some of the hitting ability, but defensively, he moves really well. He's got an amazing arm. I think he's going to, he's not going to show up messenger of what he did last year defensively, but I think he's poised to have a really big year. And I think he's going to be a big part of the Texas offense as they grow into their season. So yeah, those two guys for me are the X factors in terms of how far can this team go and what can they achieve.
Yep. I think on offense, so much of it is going to come down to those two guys being able to contribute right off the bat. All right. Pitcher of the year. I know I said I didn't want to get too cute this year. So, the easy pick would be Lucas Gordon. I'm not doing it. I'm going with my X factor. I'm going with Zane Morehouse. Maybe that's part of the reason why I do have Texas finishing third in the conference. It's because I believe if Zane Morehouse is really good, that's going to be huge for the team. And, I do think he's going to be really good. I think the experience is going to matter a lot. All the reports have been really positive. The slider just plays so much. He knows how to use that fastball to the top of the zone. That's really big in today's world of pitching. And I think he's going to be solid. That doesn't mean there won't be games where it doesn't work out. That happens even to the best pitchers. They've got bad games from time to time, but I'm going to go with Zane Morehouse, fully knowing Lucas Gordon is, the easy pick. And that's, I expect Lucas Gordon to be solid as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Gordo. His confidence is infectious. The way you talk to him ahead of the season, it's really night and day. Last season, I remember, I think it was down in Houston, and then certainly at the Super Regionals, he was like, oh my gosh, there's so many cameras. I think he's gotten used to and acclimated to, I'm the guy. This is my environment now. I own the show. And I think that confidence will really carry through. And, again, it's the Cali Road Show. You got the two Cali boys and Lucas is leading the way. So.
Yep. No, I mean, it's I'm excited to watch Gordon pitch. That first start against Arkansas, that would be a nice one to have that slider working because we know Arkansas is going to be solid. They just always are. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're looking at. We're going to have coverage on Orange Bloods all year long. So if you didn't check out the written version of the preview, we'll make sure to link that whenever this video is posted, so you can check out the written view of pretty much everything we just said. We're going to have content, we're going to have a show next week, previewing the series in Arlington. We'll have these shows throughout the year. That's the plan, just like we did last year. We're both very excited. We're both going to be in Arlington. There's a lot to look forward to. It's a little easier, or not easier, but last year it was just like, there was a lot of pressure on the team. Number one in the country, should make it to Omaha, expected to probably win the whole thing. It's going to be different this year, and I'm excited about that. But yeah, I mean, check out the Orange Bloods YouTube channel, subscribe, like all the videos. I mean, the football stuff is just nonstop, as you would expect. There's so many videos and pieces of content going out. All that's great. Man, I love this Texas basketball team. I really do. I am ready to be hurt again by a Texas basketball team like I have been in the past, because I really like this group. So, check out Keenan's stuff. He's got great work going on. I really love the basketball team. And, Orange Bloods, follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Aaron Little OB. You can follow Zach on Twitter at Zach at the Dish. Zach has never seen a tweet that he does not have a GIF ready to respond to. So you can expect all of those if you follow Zach on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, that's about all I got. Zach, you got anything else before we get out of here?
No, I'm just, I'm ready to see who's going to pick up the mantle from Melendez for your home run thread this year. So we'll looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, tease that out. We actually had Ivan, with the help of Zach, Ivan selected, the predecessor himself. So I'm not going to tell anyone until the first home run is hit. Then it's just going to be there. We'll have the official home run thread going on Twitter. But yeah. Who you got in the Super Bowl? Who you got?
I don't watch much NFL, to be honest, but I'm going to go with Patrick Mahomes because I like him slightly less than I do, or likely slightly more, I should say, than Jalen Hurts, being an OU guy. So yeah, let's go Chiefs, whatever.
Yeah, a lot of fun for the Texas guys watching the Texas Tech and the Oklahoma quarterbacks battle it out. I know I do watch a lot of NFL. It's probably too much for any normal person, but yeah, I'm leaning Eagles right now, but we'll see what happens. All right, with that, hope everyone has a great week. Hope everyone enjoyed the video. Go ahead and give us those likes, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, we're excited to be chopping it up all year long as the season gets closer and is about ready to start it. So with that, we'll see everyone soon.
Absolutely. Hook 'em.